What's going on, Summoners? Hope you're doing well. My name is Nathan Ng, and I'll be your host for our Beginner's Top Lane Guide for Season 12. Whether you're completely new to League of Legends or an experienced player that's interested in swapping roles, this is a great video for you. In it, I'll go over the fundamental concepts that you need to know in order to succeed. Make sure you hit that sub button so you don't miss out on any content like this, and let's get started with the video. To start this video off, I'm going to quickly mention what distinguishes the top lane from the other roles. Like the mid and bottom lane, you're dealing with a single lane, minions, and a turret. What makes the top lane unique is that it is the most dangerous role, the furthest away from the dragon, and has fortification on the outer turret for the first 5 minutes. These features often make it so that the top lane is one of the most volatile roles in the game and often suited for champions who are self-sufficient enough to not require team assistance. Top lane is the most dangerous because, like the bottom lane, the lane is long and exposes overextended players to ganks from enemies. Yeah, that's right, length does matter in this situation. Since the bottom lane turret is the only one without fortification early on, it is usually ideal to send 2 players there to defend it. As a result, players are left alone in the top lane to fend for themselves. It is for this reason, plus the fact that Dragon and the bottom lane are so far away, that players will often run Summoner Teleport. This powerful Summoner spell will allow a player to briefly channel the ability to, as the name suggests, teleport to an ally structure. As of Season 12, you will only be able to use the ability on allied minions, pets, and wards after the 14-minute mark. Ultimately, this means that players won't be able to impact the rest of the map as much early on, and will have to focus more heavily on their isolated 1v1s for the earlier stages of the game. By the way, if you're trying to be that player who can consistently solo carry their games, make sure to check out ProGuides.com. We have a ton of coaches who can really help you significantly improve your gameplay for any champion or role. That being said, let's talk a little bit about playing the top lane now. We'll talk about the bigger picture concepts later, but first we'll talk about the micro aspects such as trading. Trading is a fundamental concept that all players must understand. You're gonna deal damage and expect to take some in return. As a top laner, the stakes are much higher. Since you're often left to fend for yourself, you're also the most heavily impacted by any opponent that decides to come and assist their top laner as well. Taking too much damage leaves you susceptible to turret dives or ganks from the enemy jungler and mid laner. With this in mind, you always have to consider that health is indeed a resource. You can only use so much, and how aggressively you decide to trade depends heavily on the context of what the rest of your team is doing. For example, if your mid laner is pushing and winning their lane, while your jungler is near you in the top side, you have much more room to play aggressively yourself. It is a team effort after all. That being said, whenever you do decide to trade, make sure that you have a reason to do so. Trying to kill your opponent is a good enough reason, but you always have to weigh the risks as well. Pushing for level 2 and trying to kill your opponent is a common strategy that players use to pull ahead early. In this case, you want to trade with your opponent because your plan is to soften them up and make that explosive level 2 much more likely to result in a kill. Other reasons that you want to trade with your opponent are so that you can go ahead and set up dives, or so that they end up afraid to fight back. With complete control of a minion wave, you can push up and try to gank another lane, or try to set up a freeze to starve your opponent. In case you don't know what a freeze is, it's managing the minion wave so that it will always push towards you. This forces the enemy player to take a risk every single time that they want to push the waves themselves. You can also set this freeze up anywhere in the lane, and doing so close to your own turret exposes the enemy to ganks from your teammates. In case that you want to know more about minion wave management, we do have videos on our channel covering it. At the end of the day, what I want to stress by talking about trading is that a crucial aspect of playing top lane is knowing when to fight. This includes knowing when not to fight. Sometimes it's best simply to let your opponent push the wave in and avoid taking damage so you can go ahead and safely farm under the turret. Giving them the trade that they want can expose you to some risky situations that you don't want any part of. How you optimize and win trades will depend heavily on who you're playing as and against. Instead, the wisdom I hope to impart to you are the concepts that apply to every single game. Think heavily about the enemy's jungle pathing as well as the approximate time that they could end up ganking you. With that said, you can adjust how aggressively you want to trade and also how it affects the positioning of the minion wave. Practice makes perfect, so make sure you observe and just make adjustments to the results of your own trial and error. Next, let's talk about the deeper macro concepts. At its core, League of Legends is a strategy game. While there are outplays that you can make in the moment, ultimately the decisions that you make are what decide the outcome of a game. And that's why it is essential to have a game plan headed into any game. How you choose your game plan depends heavily on context. One of the most important pieces of this complex puzzle comes down to your champion choice. The top lane is home to many different champions. You can find marksmen, tanks, fighters, and even a variety of mages. To help you understand what you exactly need to do, think about what your character excels at. Champions who deal high damage in the mid to late game teamfights really want to safely just farm up and eventually dominate during the teamfights. Tanks want to set their teammates up for success as much as possible and get more out of helping their teammates pull ahead rather than building leads for themselves. Fighters typically want to pull ahead of their opponents so they can go ahead and win their direct 1v1s later on into the game and choose between team fighting and split pushing. With these general concepts in mind, you can decide how you plan to play your early game. For example, if your goal is to farm up in scale, you'll manage the minion wave carefully and try your best to keep the minion wave near your turret as much as possible. On the other hand, as a tank, you can plan to farm to level 6, then pushing as much as possible. After pushing, you may want to try and gank either the mid or bottom lane to help pull them further ahead. That said, let me ask you our question of the day. Do you see yourself as a player that focuses on carrying games, or one that works to support their teammates? I personally see myself as a team player no matter who I'm playing as. Carrying games by myself is difficult and it comes with a ton of pressure, so I typically prefer to share the burden with other players. This way, if I lose, I can blame them as well. I'm just kidding. Let me know your answers in the comments down below and let's get back to the video. Further down the road, it's really important to know that a good player is one that can adapt to many different circumstances and instantly change the trajectory of their game plan. For newer or lower level players though, it's far from wrong to try and practice a specific strategy to become comfortable and improve at a specific aspect of the game. Nobody starts an expert, everyone needs to take baby steps at one point. Although League is a game that's often won by the results of explosive teamfights, it's understood that all 5 players on a team must really grasp this concept to succeed. What's unique about the top lane is that when a player wins and pulls ahead of their direct opponent, the greatest advantage that they earn is their ability to split push. In other words, push a side lane on the opposite side of where the rest of your team is going to be. Fed top laners can impact teamfights just as effectively as any other role, but the map pressure that they can apply is often much higher. The reason is due to both the nature of the champions that are popular in the top lane and because of Summoner Teleport. As teams group up together for big objectives in teamfights, having a player that's able to safely apply pressure on the opposite side of the map is invaluable. Top laners are often able to join their teammates if a teamfight breaks out with the use of Summoner Teleport, providing a sense of security. However, the real power comes from the fact that a split pusher's team doesn't really have to start the fight. Instead, they can just stay in range to contest an objective, but avoid hard committing while a split pusher takes down turrets on the opposite side of the map. A top laner that is ahead can easily strong-arm their opponent who is presumably weaker than them. In cases where the lead isn't as decisive, it can instead come down to individual outplays that can decide which team pulls ahead. Rather than focusing on taking down turrets, however, a Fed top laner's objective can also be to push up as far as they can go without dying. This makes it so that enemy top laners that want to split push take much longer to do so. They're left with a ton of distance that they must first cover. This is how tanks can utilize their leads to apply cross-map pressure, and they can easily slow down the enemy top laner's approach and use that time to make game-winning plays. The final subject that I want to mention and talk about is the use of Summoner Teleport. While yes, you can absolutely play the top lane without teleport, it's a fact that the majority of players choose to use it. Outside of niche champion picks are optimally played with 2 aggressive summoner spells, the game encourages players to be able to quickly travel to other parts of the map. With changes to the spell for Season 12, it's actually become much easier to use it in the early game. Unfortunately, a player's ability to impact the game has gone down significantly. But with that loss of responsibility, the skill floor to use the ability properly has also gone down. Ultimately, the only feasible way to use the spell to help teammates early on is to help protect them during dives. You can choose to keep your Summoner Teleport ready in case you expect your bot laner or mid laner to be tower dove in the foreseeable future, but in most scenarios, it's best just to use it to return to lane. After heavy trading with an enemy, you can recall and quickly return to your turret to pick up a tempo lead. If they don't have teleport, they're left at a health disadvantage from the previous fighting. Otherwise, your opponent is forced to match your use of teleport instead of falling behind in XP and gold. Past the 14-minute mark, teleport's power is unrestricted, and there are plenty of uses for it. Usually, you want to think about what's the most important objective and move your character to the opposite. For example, if it's Baron, you want to apply pressure on the bottom lane, or if it's Dragon, you want to go top instead. Teleport can be used to join your team at any moment while split pushing, but it can also be used proactively. Whenever you get the chance, try to set up deep boards to get teleport to it for a team fight in the near future. Or during times that you are grouped up with your team, try to push into the enemy jungle to help your support place those deep boards instead. An ideal teleport engage pincers an enemy player or group of players so that they're forced to either turn around and take on your team, or run towards you knowing that your team is following closely behind them. Like any effective play in practically any strategy game, the goal is to force your opponent into a situation that's not only ideal for you, but also where they must do something in response. And that covers our beginner's guide to the top lane for Season 12. Make sure you check the description for a link to join our Discord. It'd be really great to see you guys there. Thank you guys so much for watching. Make sure you stay safe, stay healthy, and have a wonderful day. Peace.